Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and we just got some really good news for Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. Two different things have actually happened between yesterday and today that are filling me with more hope, confidence, excitement, and hype for a huge, epic marketing campaign that Nintendo is heating up for Metroid Prime 4 that will show the world just how big of a deal this game actually is. So what are these two different things, and what exactly is Nintendo planning to do for this big marketing campaign for Metroid Prime 4 Beyond? That's what we're getting into today. So I gotta tell you about this Gamecube looking wireless controller. It is the Warrior Bluetooth controller from NYXI, who is, yes, sponsoring today's video. This controller completely blew me away. How did it blow me away? Well, one, it feels great to hold, it's ergonomic, the buttons are snappy, but it's its level of customization and adaptability that really shocked me. So of course, you have all of your traditional controls, but as you'll notice here, there are 8 divots in a circle for each of these analog sticks. This is designed to feel like a GameCube controller, and you can use it as a GameCube controller. Literally, it comes with a GameCube wireless adapter that you can plug into a Nintendo GameCube, or a Nintendo Wii for that matter. So this controller is actually compatible with Nintendo GameCube, Nintendo Wii, PC, mobile devices, Nintendo Switch, and I also checked, I was able to get it to work on my Nintendo Switch 2 the same way I would get it to work for a Nintendo Switch 1, and I was able to enjoy a variety of games, modern games like the recent Pokemon Legends, or classic games in the Nintendo Classics app, such as F-Zero GX, a GameCube game. And it worked beautifully. Of course, if you don't like the feel of the control sticks from the GameCube era, you can swap them out for a more circular feel, or for a wider grip in the case of the C-Stick. So you have some decent customization options there. But let's say you enjoy those extra buttons on the grips for different controllers. This controller has that option, but also if you don't like the feel of those buttons on the back of the controller, if you don't want to accidentally press them, you can take them out, replace it with a different plate, and it's not noticeable. You're not going to accidentally press any other buttons if you do have that problem. So there's a great deal of customization here to fit your particular needs, and this controller works with any console. It's essentially a modern Wavebird, except it works for everything. So the NYXI Warrior Bluetooth controller is an awesome controller. I definitely recommend checking it out, which you can do by clicking the link in the description below. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about here is the news that came out today. And at first glance, you're probably going to think, well, what does this have to do with Metroid Prime 4? Stick with me here, trust me, it's going to make sense. So the big news is that Nintendo just announced that there is going to be a Kirby Air Riders Direct. Now, this was already officially announced back in September for the Nintendo Direct, but we now have a solid date, as you see here from the official Kirby Air Riders account on Twitter. Tune in on Thursday, October 23rd at 6 AM Pacific Time for a second Kirby Air Riders Direct. This presentation will feature about 60 minutes of information about the upcoming Nintendo Switch 2 game and an appearance from Mr. Sakurai. View it here, and here you see the whole little illustration, Kirby Air Riders Direct 2, it's the second Direct. There you go, it's happening at 6 AM Pacific Time, 9 AM Eastern Time. I will be live streaming this presentation. We will be enjoying this big, huge 60-minute presentation about Air Riders. It's even longer than the first one. And I do have an optimism that they're going to showcase some things here that will actually help to really sell some people on the game. So I'm excited about that. But I'm taking this Kirby news and I'm turning it into a Metroid conversation. Why? Well, part of it is because of the other thing that happened yesterday, which we'll be getting into, but also because this, I actually think, is legitimately very good news for Metroid Prime 4. So, during this weekend, I already put out a video talking about how I'm expecting a Metroid Prime 4 Direct really soon. And if you followed through that video, I also talked about there being a Kirby Air Riders Direct. And I talked about when we look at the vacancy of weeks that we still have left throughout Nintendo's schedule in this year, we are probably going to get a Kirby Air Riders Direct literally this week. So the thinking, my thought process that led me to believe there would be a Kirby Air Riders Direct this week has been proven true, because that's literally exactly what is happening. So the fact that my theory thus far has been proven true, that fills me with more confidence for the rest of the theory, which is that there will be a Metroid Prime 4 Direct to follow soon after. But of course, just because part of the theory has been confirmed, that doesn't mean the rest of the theory will be confirmed. Sure, however, it does give me more confidence. But it goes beyond that though. No pun intended there. Because with the Kirby Air Riders Direct happening this week, that's now out of the way. Nintendo can then start to focus on other things. But also, going back to the theory, this supports another thing that we're seeing even more so. So, with most of these direct presentations that are about specific games, we always see them happen about a month before the game comes out, if not a little bit more. It's never less than a month. Give or take a few short days, sure, but that's pretty much it. You look at the recent Donkey Kong Bonanza Direct, the Mario Kart World Direct, the Mario Wonder Direct, the Xenoblade Chronicles 3 Direct, the Splatoon 3 Direct, the pattern holds. And so now we have another with Kirby Air Riders. It's happening on October 23rd, the game's coming out November 20th, about a month away. So then, with that in mind, if there is going to be a Metroid Prime 4 Beyond Nintendo Direct, when would it be? The game comes out December 4th. Well, assuming that they're not going to put a game-specific Nintendo Direct in the same week of the release for another game, so for example, the first week of November, where we're getting Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, then the most likely time for there to be a Metroid Prime 4 Beyond Nintendo Direct is literally next week, the week of Halloween. But as we've talked about before, there's even more reason to think that there's going to be some significant Metroid news next week. Why? Because Nintendo has already told us that. If you go to the September Nintendo Direct, where they had shown that trailer with the Viola bike, towards the end of the trailer, they have this part where at the top it says, "The journey to launch begins," and the first thing they show is the Metroid Prime 1 through 3, a visual retrospective, coming out October 28th, the Tuesday of the week. And then after that they talk about the amiibo dates leading up to release of Metroid Prime 4 on December 4th. Myself and others have figured that this was a pretty strong implication that this is when the big marketing campaign begins for Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. So we're going to truly know next week. But Nintendo is actually hyping this up a little bit because they just gave us some new information about the Artbook yesterday. So here on the Nintendo website, they put out an article about the Artbook, they show some stuff, and they also include a 35-page sample. 15% of the artwork collection is available for free to look at. So what are we going to do? Exactly that, and we're going to try and analyze all of this and see if there's any sort of meaning we can take away from anything we see here for Prime 4. However, before doing so, I would like to point out that I do have this goal to reach 60,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So if you've gotten to this point of the video and you do find yourself enjoying this video, or you've enjoyed my prior videos, I would very much appreciate your support in whatever form that may come in. A subscription, a like, a comment, sharing the video, hyping the video, it all makes a huge difference. But I do thank you for sticking around all this time. But now to the sample of the Artbook, and I want to clarify on some things here. This Artbook, for the most part, is a celebration of the Metroid Prime series, the first 3 games. I don't think there's going to be any blatant teases for Metroid Prime 4 here that will be super obvious. However, I do think there may be some subtle ones, and I do think the overall presence of this Artbook and how Nintendo is teasing, advertising this Artbook this week for next week does say a little bit about what's happening next week, especially when we think about other things we've mentioned. But we'll get to that. First, just kind of looking through the Artbook here, there's some really beautiful stuff. We see some art for the Phazon suit, different versions they considered. They're all very cool, but I think they came up with the proper one with the final version in the game. We see the arm cannon. We see all these different transformations of the arm cannon. There's a lot of detail that they considered here. And then we see Meta Ridley, a different depiction of Ridley that we have not seen before. And this is where I sort of start to think about if maybe there is some level of teasing here for Metroid Prime 4. How so? Well, looking at this version of Ridley with this art, you may notice that this version of Ridley is gruesome. Like, we can see that Ridley is lacking in skin, we just see muscles and bone. It's almost like an undead version of Ridley. Not quite undead, but not too far off. We see a lot of machinery, of course. Meta Ridley is mechanically enhanced, but this machinery on Ridley has so much detail here. Details that we just did not see with Meta Ridley and Metroid Prime 1, and that's because, well, this level of detail is just not possible for a game like Nintendo Gamecube with everything else they would need to do. So, thinking about this design, something like this would actually be far more feasible with modern tech today. So what if we do see a Ridley, maybe even with an arm cannon as we see here? Maybe we can see a Ridley or something related to Ridley like this in Metroid Prime 4, and I think there's honestly a very good likelihood here. As I said, not necessarily Ridley himself, although possible. Could be an ancestor, could be some sort of genetic mutation that's similar, or somehow Ridley is involved. It's certainly a plausibility given how commonplace Ridley is throughout the different Metroid games. But continuing here, we see other bits of cool art. We see them showing off art for the original Metroid Prime. Cool stuff there. There are some neat producer's notes, and I'm not going to read through all of that here. I will have it linked in the description below so you can check it out with more detail and read through it all. But there are some beautiful things being shown here with all this art. It just really gets me thinking what can be possible with Metroid Prime 4 and beyond, with all the better tech and all these cool designs and environments we could see in the future, because there were some beautiful things they came up with, and the games did look incredible, but that was for hardware back in the early 2000s. What can they do now? And I feel like we have seen some beautiful things already. Now, as we see here, we're seeing some depictions of Samus's gunship, and I think it's actually important to talk about the gunship here. Actually, like, looking here, we can see, like, they were some, like, development screenshots of how they were kind of scripting how the gunship would fly into the planet. But what I wanted to get at here is that with the gunship, I actually don't think we're going to see that much of it in Prime 4. We've already seen maybe about half of it already. We've seen the opening to the game where Samus flies into the planet. I believe it's called Tanamar, with the gunship, and we know that at the end of this section, the beginning of the game, this introductory area, Samus is warped elsewhere, Vuros, and a big part of Samus's objective is to get back from where she came. So she is away from her gunship, most likely, since she was warped away to a different environment. So we're not going to see the gunship. We will not be able to go back to it. However, because Samus's goal is to get back, I think ultimately she will succeed, or at least I assume so, unless they want to try and subvert our expectations here, and then we'll see Samus's ship again, because that is a common trope of the Metroid games. You see Samus's ship at the beginning, and then you see Samus's ship at the end when she flies away or escapes from whatever it is she's escaping from. But continuing here, just looking through all this beautiful art, we see different depictions of Dark Samus, who, by the way, is the original Metroid Prime, just a different version of Metroid Prime. Cool stuff here. We see the Dark Pirate Commandos. It's just beautiful, beautiful art. Now we're moving into some Metroid Prime 2 environments like Agon Wastes, Torvus Bog. We see some depictions of Zero Suit Samus. I do prefer this more cartoony design here. I'm not a fan of how Samus looks here. But I also now wonder, like, are we going to see Zero Suit Samus in Prime 4? It's a tough call. Like, they could have some side segments where we see Zero Suit Samus, or maybe there is another part to the opening of the game where we see Samus in her Zero Suit before she fully suits up and flies into Tanamar, where everything sort of takes place. Or maybe there could be some sort of 100% ending unlockable where you can see Samus full on in her Zero Suit. That's also a possibility, which would be really cool to see, like modern visuals of how Samus would look. Here we see Rundis, Hunter from Prime 3. They're showing off some cool environments here. Man, this is just... it's just beautiful. But there is something here I want to point out in particular. It's actually not this. Well, it's a little bit this. The Omega Pirate. There is a showcasing of some pretty big bosses. And I think they haven't really showcased too many bosses yet in Metroid Prime 4. They need to sell us on this game, and showcasing boss fights I think is going to be a big part of that. Or I think it should be, at least. Boss fights are a huge part to the Metroid game, so hopefully they start to really feature that soon. And we'll be getting to that in a moment, talking a bit more about what may happen here. But there is some pretty good angles they show off. Like, this looks like it's in-game. As does this, but it's not actually something you can see in-game, because you can never see Samus in a perspective like this, and it just looks incredible. It's cool stuff here, what they're showing off, but this is the part I really want to hone in on here. Now, this is just showing off Talon Overworld, but this visual right here is not how it looks in the actual game. This is a artistic recreation. As it reads here in the producer's note, the concept for Metroid Prime Remastered was already established when we took on the project. The idea was to make absolutely no changes to the gameplay, but to completely rebuild the game for Nintendo Switch rather than porting it. This meant that all art assets had to be recreated from scratch to take full advantage of the Switch's hardware specifications. I believe that fans who have played the game can clearly see how this approach led to remarkably effective results, and I agree, so there's some beautiful stuff here. But this visual here looks even better than what we got with Metroid Prime Remastered, and I'm just left wondering, are they going to give us an enhanced version of Prime Remastered for Switch 2? I'm not saying it's going to look like this art here, but perhaps like a higher resolution. We've seen a lot of Switch 1 games get enhancements. Maybe there's something in store for Prime Remastered here, and I'll be getting to that in a moment here as I kind of conclude with looking through this art book. But yeah, beautiful imagery. And yeah, that's the it of the sample. Again, this will be linked in the description below to check it out, and obviously this is all meant to kind of get you interested in purchasing the art book. That's why Nintendo is teasing it here. Which brings me to the bigger point of them teasing it this week before it comes out next week. Yes, they're trying to spark a little bit more excitement here, a little bit more eagerness in picking up the art book, and from that perspective alone, it makes sense. But I do think with the Kirby Air Writers Direct now out, leaving next week totally vacant, it's a very likely time where we're going to get some significant Metroid Prime 4 news. Now, I've talked about how it seems like it's most likely the case we're going to see the Prime 4 Direct next week, especially because by that point we'll be close to a month away before Prime 4. Usually when we see these game-specific directs, they don't really wait until much after a month, where we're talking about like 3 weeks away. That doesn't really happen. Not in recent history, at least. So I am left thinking that next week is kind of like the best time for the Prime 4 Direct to happen, especially with Halloween and all that stuff. But I will throw out a few other considerations here. One, we also know that the Samus amiibos are coming out November 6th, which I find interesting, even though that's the release date for Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. I wonder if maybe they are going to do something that's a little unexpected, and they are going to have the Metroid Prime 4 Direct in early November. Maybe the Direct is on Tuesday or Monday or something like that, and that way there's still like a couple days to advertise Hyrule Warriors, and I'm sure they're going to start advertising Hyrule Warriors this week or next week, and so there will be a little bit of a lead up there. But also, it might make some sense to not actually have the Metroid Prime 4 Direct next week, because maybe what they'll do is that they'll announce the Metroid Prime 4 Direct, make it a little bit more of a spectacle, not the one day in advance thing as they do with a lot of Directs, and that can still happen and things can still be very hype, but they may announce it in advance, and they'll do that because they have other plans about Metroid next week. We have the art book about Metroid Primes 1 through 3. What if they announce that there is going to be a Switch 2 upgrade for Metroid Prime Remaster, getting more people to play that game? But then they also announced that Metroid Prime 2 and 3 are coming out. Oftentimes, Nintendo has a game coming out for Halloween or that week of Halloween, and they don't have anything right now. Now, it's not always the case. It's either in the last week of October or the week after, and we are getting Hyrule Warriors the week after. But putting out like a Metroid Prime 2 and 3 on the eShop, that's a smaller thing. It's not a full-on physical release, but it's still giving people the opportunity to go back and play these games on Switch 1 and Switch 2, and getting out updated versions of all these games for both Switch 1 and Switch 2, 1 through 3, alongside the art book that would help to advertise these games, and vice versa, all next week, while announcing maybe a Prime 4 Direct next week, would certainly be a great way to start the true big marketing campaign. They tease the art book this week, and perhaps they do things in a big way next week, and they still will not have even had the Prime 4 Direct. Then they do the Metroid Prime 4 Direct maybe in the first week of November, or perhaps the week afterwards, after Hyrule Warriors comes out, which would be then 3 weeks away before Prime 4 is actually coming out, which does seem like a shorter time than usual, but Nintendo has been known to break the pattern oftentimes, and 3 weeks is really not that much less than 4 weeks, so they could absolutely do that, and they can still have a great marketing campaign leading up to release, especially with other stuff happening like what we're talking about here with all this, with this art book and the amiibos, and possibly an update to Prime 1 Remastered, and then also making 2 and 3 available. There's various ways they can really ramp up the marketing here, and to that end, I'll also say maybe we don't actually get specifically a Metroid Prime 4 Direct, but we effectively do with a variety of updates leading up to release. Maybe it starts with the art book and Prime 2 and 3, but maybe after that, they put out a trailer, and then they start doing developer diaries, and so we're just learning a little bit more every week, or every couple weeks, and then the game comes out, and we have a huge, epic final trailer. Regardless, we need to have at least one trailer that's not just an overview trailer, by the way, but a trailer that very much kind of like what we saw for that final Breath of the Wild trailer, or that final Tears of the Kingdom trailer, that is just so hype and exciting. It inspires people to get this game. The Breath and Tears of the Kingdom trailers depicted games that were better than the actual games, and these games are incredible. They're masterpieces, just for the record. But the stories that were being told seem so exciting with these trailers. With Metroid, which is actually a series that has a very strong story, and with what we've seen with the budget that they're putting into the cutscenes in Metroid Prime 4, much bigger budgets than we see for pretty much any game, including Zelda actually, at least in terms of the cutscenes, they have material here, especially with all the incredible visuals, to put together a very strong, compelling trailer that can really sell a lot of people. So I think there's tons and tons of potential here. Regardless, I am excited for the Kirby Air Riders Direct. I'm even more excited that it seems like some vacancies have opened up. I'm excited that Nintendo is teasing the art book, showing off some great sample pages here, and it feels like they're trying to make this into a bigger deal. Perhaps that it ties into Metroid Prime 1, 2, 3, and 4. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.